Revealed, how a millionaire's incredible heart found love with a homeless girl at a bus stop. James Parker, a 35-year-old millionaire entrepreneur, stood tall in his high-rise office, gazing out over the drizzling streets of San Francisco. The skyline shimmered brilliantly, but the emotional turmoil within him felt like a heavy cloud. It was supposed to be the American dream, right? Yet, beneath his tailored suit and designer watch was a deep loneliness that wealth couldn't touch. The philanthropic ventures he poured his heart into didn't fill the void. It was an emptiness that wrapped around him like the rain that poured down outside. On a particularly dreary afternoon, James felt an unusual urge to escape the glass confines of his office. He found himself at a bus stop, raindrops splattering against the pavement. With his heart heavy and thoughts racing, he watched city life rush by, horns blared, pedestrians hustled, and still, he felt detached. Then came Sarah. She appeared from the shadows, a burst of color amidst the gray, a spirited young woman with bright eyes, despite wrapping herself in a threadbare coat. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice cutting through the downpour. For a moment, time stood still. A smile crept across James's face. "You could say that," he chuckled. They shared stories that felt like old friends reunited. As raindrops danced, Sarah revealed her tragic past. "I lost everything," she admitted, her voice quivering. "But I dream of a life beyond this." In her eyes, James saw a reflection of his own struggles, a yearning for connection he had buried deep within. They laughed, and suddenly, the loneliness didn't sting as much, but as their bond grew, so did the concerns of those around him. His friends from elite circles were appalled. "You can't be serious, James. A homeless girl?" Their sneers cut like knives, echoing the superficial views he thought he'd surpassed. Yet he couldn't shake Sarah off. Something within her stirred his soul, then the world turned upside down. Sarah was unjustly arrested, caught in a misunderstanding that reflected the divide they both faced. Panic prickled at the back of James's mind. Heart pounding, he knew he had to help. But as he threw money at the problem, he was confronted with a harsh truth: money alone couldn't rewrite her worth in the eyes of the law. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. James felt a surge of responsibility, a new fire igniting within him. He decided to take a stand, to publicly defend Sarah, challenging the entrenched biases of their society. His heartfelt plea shook the crowd and ignited a passionate response. Yet, with each word he spoke, uncertainty hung heavy in the air. Would he truly be able to bridge the chasm between their worlds? The weight of social prejudice threatened to tear their bond apart. Caught in a whirlwind of emotion, James felt transformed yet vulnerable. It dawned on him that perhaps this was more than just about Sarah. It was about awakening a movement that could ripple through the hearts of many. What would happen next? Would he manage to shatter the barriers that divided them, or would the very fabric of his world unravel? The rain continued, but now it felt different, charged with the hope of change. The following days were a blur for James. He found himself engulfed in a frantic pace, diving headfirst into legal documents, interviews with the media, and meetings with advocacy groups. He was determined to do everything possible for Sarah, and he wasn't going to let go. His office, once a sanctuary, became a place of strategy and urgency. Colleagues looked at him differently now, some with admiration, others with skepticism. "James, are you sure about this?" asked his assistant, Melissa, one afternoon. She looked concerned, her brow furrowed as she handed him a stack of papers. "You're risking your reputation over a campaign?" He glanced up, feeling the weight of her judgment. "It's not about the campaign, Melissa. It's about Sarah. She deserves a chance." "But what if it backfires? What will the board say? What about your investors?" James felt adrenaline course through him. "I don't care," he declared, surprising himself with the strength of his response. For the first time in years, he was fighting for something real, something that mattered beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. Meanwhile, Sarah sat in a cramped holding area, her spirit unbroken despite her circumstances. She could hear voices outside the media frenzy escalating as they caught wind of her story. Her heart raced at the thought of James fighting for her. But was it enough? Would the world see her as more than just a homeless girl? As days turned into weeks, James rallied support from local activists and community leaders, turning out rallies to raise awareness for Sarah's plight. The movement caught fire across social media. With each hashtag, each post, a flood of compassion washed over the city. James couldn't help but feel hopeful. He had never seen such unity before, but there were challenges too. Threatening phone calls began to creep into his life, whispers of disapproval that rattled him. "You're just a puppet for a homeless girl," one caller said. "You won't be able to save her. She doesn't belong in your world." Each taunt cut deeper than he wanted to admit. Every night, after pouring his heart into the cause, he would return home to an empty mansion, the silence a piercing reminder of the distance returned. The city lights blinked in the distance, but they felt so far away. The affection he felt for Sarah simmered just below the surface, a potential that he both treasured and feared. As the trial approached, the sobering reality of what could go wrong weighed heavily. What if all his efforts were in vain? What if his words did not change the hearts of those in power? James stood alone on his balcony one evening, staring out into the swirling fog that enveloped the city. His chest tightened, the fear curling around him, suffocating him. Just then, his phone buzzed a message from Sarah. "Thanks for fighting for me," it read. He closed his eyes, feeling tears sting. A rush of determination surged through him, filling the hollow space. He would do this for her, and he would face down every sneer, every doubt. But would it be enough? Lost in thought, James wondered what the outcome would be. The lines between their worlds were blurring rapidly, and the stakes were higher than ever. As he prepared to make a crucial announcement, a voice deep within him whispered, "What if your love for her is the key to breaking all the chains that bind you both?" His heart raced with anticipation and fear. Was he ready to claim that love openly? Tomorrow loomed large with every possibility. Would he take that step, or would fear hold him back when it mattered most? The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm glow over the city. James stood in front of the bathroom mirror, gripping the sink. His reflection stared back at him with uncertainty, a man caught between two worlds. Today was the day he would speak, not just as an attorney, but as someone who cared deeply about someone he barely knew. At first he picked up his suit jacket, feeling its weight on his shoulders. It felt like armor, a barrier against the world that had been so quick to judge both him and Sarah. As he walked toward the door, he took a deep breath. Today was about more than just a trial. It was about awakening the compassion buried beneath headlines and cliches. At the courthouse, the atmosphere was electric. Reporters bustled about, cameras flashing, eager to capture every moment of the highly publicized case. James could feel their eyes on him, scrutinizing his every move. Still, his focus remained steadfast. He spotted Sarah sitting in the small waiting area, her worn jeans and hoodie and armor of a different kind, but the sparkle in her eyes made her shine. "Hey, ready?" he asked, trying to mask the nervous quiver in his voice. Sarah smiled, though her nervousness was palpable. "I think so," she replied, her voice soft but steady. "It's just, what if they still don't listen?" "They will," he asserted, even though he could not shake the knot in his stomach. "We're here for a reason. You deserve a chance to speak your truth." The moment they stood together, something shifted. It was as if all the noise from outside fell away, leaving only clarity and hope. They walked toward the courtroom hand in hand, both supported by the unseen thread of faith they had woven together, even if just lately. Inside, the room was intimidating, stark and cold. The judge's gavel struck, silencing the crowd, and James could feel the weight of every gaze. He took his position, the opening statement ready in his mind, but his heart forced him to pause. "Before we begin," he said, his voice cutting through the tension, "I need to say something important. All eyes turned toward him. What you see in this courtroom is not just a legal battle. We have a young woman here today who represents so much more than a label society has placed on her, a homeless girl. She is a survivor. A person with dreams, hopes, and a right to be seen. He glanced back at Sarah, her expression mixed with surprise and gratitude. The atmosphere seemed to change, a ripple of humanity washed over the crowd. People shifted, some whispering to each other, recognizing the truth in his words. They were feeling it too, something deeper than just a case. James continued, Sarah deserves better than what life has thrown at her. And I'm here to stand with her, not just as her lawyer, but as someone who believes in her. A low murmur spread through the gallery, but it wasn't contempt this time. It was understanding, compassion. He caught the eye of someone near the front. An older woman, tears glistening in her eyes, nodded slowly, as if she understood all too well what it meant to fight against a world that doesn't see you. James took a breath and summoned the emotions building within him. It's time to open our hearts and listen. It's time to realize that our world doesn't have to be divided by wealth and poverty. Just then, a commotion broke out as a group of activists entered the courtroom, chanting Sarah's name. They held signs that read "Every life matters" and "Justice for Sarah." The energy shifted again, electric with solidarity. James felt a surge of hope. As he prepared to continue, a thought struck him. Would this day become a turning point for both Sarah and himself? Would their intertwined destinies inspire real change? The audience hung on his every word. Would he finally be brave enough to embrace the love blooming between them? Would he let go of the last shreds of fear holding him back from fighting for the future they both secretly longed for? The moment slowed, realization dawning this was only the beginning. James felt the waves of emotion crash over him as he stood there, vulnerable and exposed. The charged air hummed with anticipation. Could he be the voice Sarah needed? The thought of everything they had worked for surged in his veins. This was their moment. Sarah, he began, pulling in a breath to steady his racing heart. Why don't you tell us a little about yourself? The gallery fell silent, every person leaning in, eager for her words. Sarah's gaze flickered nervously, but with James beside her, she felt a tiny spark of courage. I never thought I'd have to be here, talking about this. I always wanted to be someone people looked up to, not someone they looked down on, she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. I was always a normal girl. I used to go to school, just like everyone else. I had dreams to study art, to create things that would bring joy to people. She paused, visibly shaking, her eyes searching the room. Then things changed. I lost everything in a matter of months. My parents, they couldn't handle it. I was left to fend for myself. A soft murmur spread through the courtroom, like whispers of understanding. James watched Sarah, pride swelling in him. Here was the young woman he had come to admire, flawed but fiercely resilient, her spirit shining even in the face of adversity. As she continued, her memories spilled out, the moments of despair intermingled with flickers of hope. I spent nights in shelters and on the streets. But I kept my head up. I'd draw on napkins, doodling dreams that felt so far away. I'd close my eyes and picture a better life. The older woman who had made eye contact with James now covered her mouth, tears dropping onto her wrinkled hands. Yes, they felt it too. Everyone in that room had their own burdens, their own stories of struggle. James felt a weight lift as he realized he was not just fighting for Sarah, they were both being lifted together. And today, Sarah wants everyone to know that she hasn't given up, he interjected, his voice steady but filled with emotion. She represents the fight we all must have to find worth even when the world tries to define us. A ripple of applause broke out, surprising everyone with its warmth. Even the judge seemed momentarily caught off guard, his stern expression softening just a touch. James glanced back at Sarah, the pride radiating from her transforming into a glow. She drew strength from the reaction, the realization sinking in, they were not alone. With every word, she was being embraced by the very community that once overlooked her, but as the tension began to ease, James felt a shadow shift in the corner of his mind. What would come next? Would this moment last? Or would they return to a world where the flicker of compassion faded back into ignorance, a knot twisted in his gut? What if the jury couldn't see past the labels? What if Sarah's courage wasn't enough? As he turned to begin his concluding remarks, his heart raced anew. There was still so much at stake. Let us not forget, he said, raising his voice once more, this isn't just about justice for Sarah. This is about redefining how we view each other. This trial doesn't end in this courtroom. We all have to carry this conversation forward. The gallery remained hushed, hanging on every word, and deep down, James prayed that he could inspire more than just a verdict. Could this be a movement? A reclaiming of dignity, and at that moment, amidst the flickering hopes and tangible fears, Sarah locked eyes with him, a question hanging between them: could love really transform in the unlikeliest of places? That question lingered in the air, building the tension around them. What would happen when the gavel came down? Would it make or break everything they fought for? James could feel his pulse quicken again as he prepared to speak. The weight of the moment pressed on him, heavier than before. He glanced at Sarah, her breath still shaky but her eyes brighter now. Their connection felt like an electric charge, inching him forward into the unknown. We stand here today, united in Sarah's journey, he continued, the urgency in his voice growing. But we must remember this isn't just a story of one, it's a reflection of all of us. Each of us carries a heavy load. Stories of pain, of loss, but also of hope. The audience took in every word, absorbed by the stillness heavy in the air. People glanced at each other, some nodding, others wiping tears from their cheeks. He could sense the stirring of emotions, the awakening of understanding. It was as if they were all slowly waking up, together. Sarah didn't end up here by choice. She didn't choose to be invisible. And yet, here she is sharing her truth with us, James pressed on. We have a choice, too. We can choose to see her, to support her, and to acknowledge the struggles of countless others who reflect her experiences. Someone in the back murmured, "We hear you." James felt a swell of gratitude, the glimmer of hope reaching out to touch him. Beyond this trial, he said, passion igniting his words, we need change. We must listen to the voices of those who feel forgotten. We need to build bridges instead of walls. We must redefine who we are as a community. The clapping grew, a crescendo of support building without warning. The judge's gavel rang out, but the resonance of the moment hung thick in the air, bouncing off the walls of the courtroom like a promise of change. As the applause faded, Sarah turned toward James, her face lit with wonder. Do you think they really get it? She asked softly, concerned doubt creeping in. James smiled, hoping to exude confidence. I think they're starting to. But in the depths of his mind, unease lingered. What if this was just a moment, a fleeting sensation? What if the world outside this courthouse was too set in its ways to change? Moments later, the judge cleared his throat, calling for silence. I appreciate the passion here today, he stated, his voice steady but firm. But we are here for a matter of justice. The jury will now deliberate on the case before them. As whispers rushed through the audience, James squeezed Sarah's hand. Whatever happens in this room, you've already fought. You've already won, he whispered. Do you really believe that? She asked, her eyes searching his. That he nodded. You've shown them what resilience looks like. But even as he spoke, doubt clawed at James's insides. There were still so many unknowns waiting to unfold. Could this uplifting moment withstand the reality of the verdict? Minutes felt like hours as they waited for the jury. Hope wrestled with fear in his heart. He thought of the future they had started to sketch out, dreams of art, of friendship, of something more between them. Suddenly, the double doors swung open, and the jury filed back in, each member's face betraying nothing. A hush fell over the gallery. The air was charged with anxiety and anticipation. James's heart pounded painfully, each beat echoing the questions he feared to ask. Would this be their breakthrough, or their undoing? The foreperson cleared her throat, and all eyes were locked on her. In that breathless moment, everything hung in balance. Would the verdict reflect the change they all sought? Noticing Sarah's trembling hands, James reached out, determined to stand with her, no matter the outcome. As silence submerged them, the words "we find the defendant" pierced through the tension like a lightning bolt, shaking the foundation of their hopes. What would come next could either build them up or tear them apart. The foreperson's voice echoed throughout the courtroom, rising and falling with the gravity of each word. "We find the defendant not guilty." The air vibrated with disbelief at first, a collective intake of breath. Then, like a dam breaking, the emotions surged. Gasps, sobs, and an explosion of applause erupted as chaos filled the room. James felt Sarah's hand grip tighter, trembling, and he turned to see her face light up in shock. "Did they really?" She stuttered, eyes wide, disbelief mingled with joy. "They did, Sarah. They did." James shouted over the clamor, pulling her into his arms, the world around them fading. It was as though laughter and tears had merged into a symphony of relief. Their struggle had woven them, and in that moment, they were invincible. As the hugs poured in from people around them, James realized they weren't just celebrating Sarah's victory. They were celebrating connection, community, the promise of a better tomorrow. Each person who embraced them represented a testament to the struggles faced together, a family formed from the shared experience of pain and triumph. Yet amid the joy, a whisper of uncertainty brushed against the edges of James's mind. He could sense the dark corners of reality creeping back in. How would they all sustain this moment? How would they turn applause into action when the trial was nothing more than a memory? Radiating warmth, Sarah pulled back, her glorious smile woven with newfound determination. "This isn't the end, is it?" she said, more a statement than a question. "No, it's the beginning," James replied, searching her radiant eyes, grasping for the trust they had built through the hardest moments. "We need to keep this momentum. We need to make our voices heard while the world is listening." With the audience still buzzing, the judge waved for calm, bringing everyone's attention back to him. "I commend this community for its passion. However, let us not forget that justice does not end here, and each of us has a role in shaping what comes next." As the judge's words echoed through him, James made a silent vow to himself. There was work ahead, and he was ready. They would continue to advocate for those like Sarah who felt unseen. But as they filed out of the courtroom, the excitement began to fade, replaced by a creeping apprehension. The real world was waiting outside those walls. With their newfound voice came responsibility. Would they really be heard? A soft touch on James's arm pulled him from his thoughts. It was Sarah, her face reflecting a complicated blend of hope and anxiety. What if this changes everything? Or change nothing at all? James hesitated. He could feel her fears resonating within him. They had achieved something massive today, but it was only a single step on a much longer journey. "We'll take it one step at a time. Together." She nodded, a flicker of resolve igniting her spirit. "Together," she echoed, and he could see the fight coming back into her eyes. As they stepped outside, the sun broke through the clouds, bathing them in golden light. The world felt fresh and new, but outside those courthouse doors, the streets echoed with the struggles of others waiting to be uplifted. In that moment, a thought struck James. What if their fight could spark a movement? But how could they reach out? How could they pull others into this vision of hope? Questions raced through his mind like leaves in an autumn wind, but one thing was clear: their journey had only begun. The weight of responsibility hung heavy, but the possibility of change flickered just within reach. He turned to Sarah, ready to forge ahead, but her gaze was fixed down the street. "James, look." She pointed, drawing his attention to a large crowd gathering around a community bulletin board. That moment, the significance of what was happening registered, and James felt a spark of inspiration course through him. What if they took a leap, not just for themselves but for everyone waiting to be seen? Before he could ponder further, Sarah was already moving toward the crowd, the determination radiating off her as she embraced this new chapter of their lives. The afternoon sun cast a warm glow on their path, and James caught up with her, excitement bubbling within. Together, they stepped closer to the crowd, ready to hear the voices that needed upliftment, and perhaps, ready to share their own story of resilience and transformation. How would they start? What would they say? The moment of truth lay ahead as they joined the throng, pulsating with hope and a united purpose. James and Sarah merged into the crowd, the energy palpable. Faces lit with anticipation surrounded them, stories etched in every wrinkle and smile. They could feel the pulse of shared humanity, a heartbeat united by dreams of a better tomorrow. "What's happening?" James asked, leaning closer to a middle-aged woman with a welcoming smile. "They're sharing their stories. People need to be heard, especially those who've been ignored," she said, her voice steady and sincere. Sarah's eyes sparkled. "That's perfect. We can share our story too. Maybe it'll inspire someone." Just as the idea took root, a young man with wild hair and earnest eyes stepped to the front. "I was homeless for years," he began, his voice quaking but resolute. "I lost everything, but I found hope. I found a community that cared." As he spoke of nights spent under bridges, James felt a lump in his throat. His struggles paled in comparison to the hardships faced by so many. Yet, there was something warm in the young man's words, a promise that healing was possible. The crowd nodded, some leaning in closer, soaking up his every syllable. When he finished, applause erupted, and others began to step forward. Stories spilled out like confetti, each one a testament to resilience. Sorrow, laughter, struggle, and triumph threaded through the air, weaving a tapestry of humanity. James glanced at Sarah, her eyes glimmering with inspiration. "We should get involved. We can help amplify these voices." "Absolutely," she replied, her enthusiasm infectious. "But how?" "We need a platform." Their conversation was cut short when an older woman stepped up to the makeshift stage, her hands shaking as she adjusted her glasses. "I lost my son," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "To the streets, to carelessness. I wish someone would have heard him, really heard him." Silence washed over the crowd, heavy and painful. That moment seemed to crystallize everything. The urgency of their mission sank deep into James' heart. This was where they needed to be, not just for Sarah, but for everyone who felt as though they had lost their way. "We'll find a way," James whispered to Sarah, his mind racing. "We can organize workshops, gathering something to keep this going." "Like a community dialogue?" Sarah said, her face lighting up. "A place where everyone can share?" "Yes. We can make sure everyone feels validated, that their experiences matter." His words tumbled out, a vision unfurling before them like the sunrise. Suddenly, the crowd erupted into cheers as another young woman expressed her gratitude for being included, her voice rising above the fervor. "Together, we can build a support network. Let us lift each other up." James felt the excitement building, not just in him, but in the very air. This was a moment of awakening, a shift towards something bigger. He and Sarah had come here for inspiration, but they were discovering that they had the power to lead change. As they stepped away from the crowd for a moment, searching for a quiet space to gather their thoughts, James hesitated, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. What if we really can't do this? What if the systems are too strong? "James," Sarah said, her voice steady and sure. "Every great change has felt impossible at one point. We can't let fear stop us. Not now." Her certainty was like a lifeline, pulling him back from the edge of doubt. As they turned to return, he made a promise to himself. This moment was just the beginning. Their stories were no longer just their own. They belonged to a community ready to share the weight of the world on their shoulders. But as they stepped back towards the crowd, a shiver ran through him. What challenges awaited? What obstacles would they face as they shattered the silence that had kept so many in the shadows? With every step, his heart raced, anticipation hanging thick like morning mist. They had the vision, now, they needed the courage to act. "Let us start this journey," he said firmly, turning to face Sarah. "And never look back." But before they could take another step, a sudden shout rang out from the crowd. James whipped his head around, his heart pounding. The shout seemed to slice through the air, and instantly, the crowd was buzzing with confusion. Faces turned, eyes darted from one person to another. Whispers crackled like electricity, everyone leaning in, hungry for the next moment. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, gripping his arm. Before James could answer, a tall man in a sharp suit pushed his way to the front, an unusual contrast to the crowd surrounding him, a beacon of wealth against the backdrop of shared struggle. His sharp features softened just a bit as he spoke, though his words came out with urgency. I know this is a place of sharing, and I admire that. But I need to say something that might shock you all. The crowd hushed, leaning forward in anticipation. James felt a tingle of unease. Sarah's eyes widened, reflecting an amalgam of concern and curiosity. The girl they mentioned in that headline, she's important to me. She's not just a story, she's my story. I love her. His voice quivered just a bit, and in that moment, the conflict between his polished exterior and vulnerable sentiment struck a chord. James exchanged a bewildered look with Sarah. Who is he talking about? He murmured, his heart racing with uncertainty. Let him explain, Sarah said, her gaze fixed on the man, a mixture of empathy and skepticism etched on her face. As I stand here, the man continued, I want you all to understand the reality of our world. We build walls, but sometimes the person who breaks them down is the one you least expect. He took a deep breath, almost as if he was wrestling with his own emotions. The truth is, I met a girl at a bus stop last year. She had a spark in her eyes that caught me off guard. To see her strength, it changed me. A murmur rolled through the crowd. James could feel their collective heartbeat picking up, intrigued. I never knew struggle until I saw her face, the man said, his voice thickening. It woke me up to how blind I was to the lives outside my own, the stories I'd never cared to learn. She taught me what love truly means. Curiosity swirled, and James caught a glimpse of Sarah's expression, a mixture of hope and disbelief. Could this be true? Could love bridge such a divide? I promise, the man pleaded, I'm not here to save anyone. I want to share our journey, to show that no matter where you come from, your story matters. We can lift each other up. The intensity in his voice pulled at something deep inside James. This was a call to action, to be together, to stand unified against the reticence that often overwhelmed them. Before James could fully grasp the weight of the moment, a young woman stepped up beside the suited man, a haunting beauty with a hint of sadness lingering in her smile. It's true, she said softly, her voice brave yet delicate. This man, he showed me kindness in my darkest moments. I was homeless, invisible to so many. But he saw me. Wow, Sarah whispered, the realization washing over her as she inhaled sharply. James felt the air shift, a wave of connection surged through the crowd, sparking a sense of shared purpose. People began to nod, exchanging looks of understanding as they absorbed the weight of this revelation, but then, with a sudden shift, tensions flared again. A voice cut through the crowd, a man with a strong build, an unmistakable air of bitterness. What do either of you know about our struggles? You think your charity can change anything? The room held its breath, the shift in energy palpable, as all eyes turned once more to the suited man and the young woman. James and Sarah stood rooted, sensing the undercurrents of anger that could erupt into something much larger. Will love conquer doubt? James thought. With each moment teetering on the edge of chaos, he realized their journey was already firing into an unexpected direction. Nothing was guaranteed, yet the potential hung thick in the air. And at that moment, James knew this was only the beginning. Would they rise together, or would the familiar barriers of mistrust pull them apart? He looked at Sarah, a silent question hanging between them. What would it take to change everything? The atmosphere grew tenser as the man in the suit faced down the challenge issued by the bitter man. The room felt electric, hearts thumping in sync with the anticipation. James felt a tight knot growing in his stomach, a mix of anxiety and desperation to see where this would lead. Please, let us not turn this moment into a fight, the suited man said, his arms raised slightly as if to ease the tension. His voice was softer now, appealing to the humanity in everyone. We all have our battles. I'm not here to undermine your struggles, I'm here to ignite a conversation. The bitterness in the crowd shifted, pivoting from confrontation to curiosity. James could see hesitant nods, some people crossing their arms steadfastly, while others leaned in closer as if desperate to hear more. Tell us your story. Someone shouted from the back, breaking the silence like a bolt of lightning. Yes. shouted another voice, this one from a young woman who stood close to James. "We want to know how your love changed you. Maybe you can teach us something." The first man's face lit up with hope. "Thank you. Truly." He gestured towards the young woman at his side, whose name felt as weighty as the moment. "Her name is Lily, and in a world where I wore blinders, she pulled them off. She showed me that love isn't an empty word, it's an action. It's the courage to face our realities together." James felt the heat of Sarah's hand tightening around his arm. He could see the flicker of understanding in her eyes, a potential for solidarity among strangers, like tiny seeds ready to bloom. "What do you mean?" the bitter man challenged. "What does it matter if you throw pity on those like her? It changes nothing." "In the beginning, I thought this was all about giving back," the suited man continued. "But it was about being enriched by someone who has faced more than I can imagine. Each minute I spent with Lily taught me to look beyond myself, to embrace compassion. It made me more human." James caught Sarah's gaze and felt a swell of hope. Could this really be what they needed? A shift in perspective that brought everyone together. Lily stepped forward, her presence palpable. "I used to feel invisible," she confessed. "But through love and kindness, I learned I'm not alone. We've all struggled, but we're all worthy of being seen." A hushed awe spread across the crowd. Each person began to see hints of their struggles in what she revealed. Eyes softened, doubts wavering. "But that's easy for you to say," the bitter man snapped again, his voice louder, more defiant. "You're standing here with a suit and a story about love. It won't feed us. Love alone can't help when you're cold and hungry." In an instant, Lily's demeanor shifted. "You're right," she said, vibrations of conviction quaking in her voice. "But what if we did this together? What if we used our stories to inspire action? We can create support systems, uplift each other, find ways to help our communities. This doesn't end with us talking. It starts here, right now." A ripple of murmurs ran through the crowd, igniting discussions, voices rising and falling like waves. James felt the transformation building, bubbling with potential. "There it is," Sarah breathed, the fire in her voice growing. "What if this is what brings us together? Imagine the stories we could share." James's heart raced as he envisioned the possibilities, the connections, the healing, and the chance to turn pain into purpose. But the road ahead still felt fraught with challenges. As the cheers and discussions swelled around them, a loud crack of thunder echoed in the distance, almost like a warning. James turned to Sarah, excitement sparkling in her eyes, but also a shadow of uncertainty hovering just behind. What if this is just the beginning of something far more complex? What if we can't handle it? Their eyes locked, and in that fleeting moment, they both understood the fragility of hope. With the crowd buzzing around them, James took a deep breath. "Then let us find out together." But could they truly bridge the gaps now exposed? Would this newfound unity stand tall against the storms of doubt already brewing? As the crowd erupted into passionate discussions, they were unaware that darker clouds loomed ahead, threatening to rain on this fragile hope. Would love indeed conquer all, or was there more to this unfolding story than met the eye? The community buzzed with excitement, conversations swirling around like autumn leaves in the wind. James felt a surge of electricity in the air, the kind that lit a fire in his chest. It was intoxicating. They were standing at the edge of something monumental, fueled by the courage of those who'd been voiceless for too long. Sarah's hand squeezed his, bonding them together in this fervor for change. Yet, as conversations flourished, a thick cloud of uncertainty hovered over James's heart. What if the energy they felt fizzled out like a dying flame? Would this be another moment that ultimately faded into forgotten headlines, echoing with the discontent of the past? "I think we should gather everyone," Sarah said, her eyes alight with passion. "They need to feel united, not just today, but beyond this. We can plan events, create opportunities, anything to keep this movement alive." James marveled at her spirit. She was a storm all her own, a force that pulled him into her dream. "Yes. Let us set up a meeting space, somewhere we can draw in more voices." Just as they began to strategize, another figure pushed through the eager crowd. It was the man from before, the one in the suit, now with a determined stance. "I couldn't leave without speaking again. I believe together we can spark change, but we need concrete actions. Let us build a coalition, reach out to local businesses, organizations, everyone." The crowd began to cheer in agreement, glances exchanged with newfound purpose. James felt shivers of inspiration run down his spine. Was this what unity looked like? A vision of collaboration ready to change lives. As each person stepped forward, sharing their ideas and stories, James felt the weight of their lives surrounding him. He turned to Sarah, her eyes filled with tears of joy, every fragment of her being shining with purpose. "This is it, isn't it?" she whispered. "We can change everything." Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. A voice cut through the energy, sharp and filled with doubt. "But what happens when the spotlight dims? Will you still care then?" It was the very man who had challenged the suited stranger. The response was instantaneous. Words of encouragement sprang like flowers through cracks in concrete. Lily took a step forward, her voice steady. "We can't do this alone, but together, every voice strengthens the echo. Change takes time. It takes commitment. But we each have a part to play." Her words resonated, and James watched the crowd's disbelief dissolve, replaced by waves of solidarity. He turned to Sarah, their hearts pulsing together in rhythm. This was their moment. "All right, folks," he called out. "Let us make a pact today. We're not just sharing stories, we're investing in a community." Eyes began to twinkle with understanding, recognition of possibility spreading like wildfire. "We will establish regular gatherings, workshops, voices of art, healing spaces. We'll dive deeper into every story and every struggle." Cheers erupted as they all began to plan, ideas spilling into the air like rain on parched ground. Hours passed like seconds as they built a bridge of hope, crafting blueprints for a shared future. But in quiet moments, James felt a tingling anxiety overtake him. Were they strong enough to hold this community together? As night fell, the sun dipped beyond the horizon, coloring the sky with the warmth of deep oranges and purples. They stood together, arm in arm, committed to this dream that was now swelling in their hearts. "Whatever happens next," James murmured, looking at Sarah, "we'll face it as a family, right?" "Always," she replied, gaze unwavering. In that declaration, storms could not shake their resolve. The path ahead would be a winding road laden with challenges, but they had found strength in unity, sturdy, resilient like an oak tree against the fiercest winds. And so, as they embraced the evening nearing, hearts echoing with a sense of community, James made a promise in his mind. This was just the beginning. Together, they would carve out a space where love could flourish, where stories could be told, and where change would not just be spoken about but lived. As they transitioned into the night, a flickering light cast shadows along the streets. It felt bright, like a beacon guiding them toward a future overflowing with hope, one where they would rise together, hand in hand, to shatter every chain that sought to bind them. Now is the time for you to join this journey. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive stories filled with hope and transformation. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm, help us reach the people who need to hear this message. Comment below your reactions and feelings about this incredible ending. We want to hear your story too, and don't wait not even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Together, let's continue the movement, inspiring change for a better tomorrow.